Hi there, welcome back to Scott Goes Pop. My name is James Kelly. So it's that time of the week again where we look at the weekly YouGov poll, and these YouGov polls are, of course, of more interest to us than polls from other companies because YouGov structure and weight their Scottish subsamples correctly. Perhaps they're not quite as important now that we've finally had the first full-scale Scottish poll since the start of the summer. Which gave us a much better idea of where the parties all stand. But nevertheless, that was only one poll from one company, and these straws in the wind are still important. So we'll start with the GB-wide figures from YouGov, which have actually attracted a great deal of interest, even though they're nothing particularly out of the ordinary. Reform UK remain in the lead on 27% of the vote, which is down to Labour remain in second place on 22% of the vote, which is up to. The Conservatives are unchanged in third place on 17%. The Liberal Democrats are unchanged on 15%. The Greens are up to on 12%. The SNP are unchanged on 3%, that's of the GB-wide vote, of course. And Plaid Cymru are unchanged on 1%. Now, some London political commentators, some amateur Twitter commentators have got very excited about this because it's a 4-point reduction in the Reform lead over Labour. And, obviously it comes just after the Reform conference, which a lot of people cringed at because you had Andrea Jenkins, the mayor of Greater Lincolnshire, singing a very bad self-penned song. And you had Lucy Connolly being welcomed as if she was Nelson Mandela. I think a lot of people maybe project their own reaction to that onto potential Reform voters and think, oh, well, this must have caused a big reduction in the Reform lead. But in fact, maybe a 4-point reduction in the Reform lead, but all that is a 2-point reduction in the Reform vote and a 2-point increase in the Labour vote, which could easily be margin of error noise. But there was one very excitable person, Labour supporter on Twitter, who claims that this was a 4-point swing or 4% swing from Reform to Labour after the disaster of the Reform conference. But it's not a 4% swing. That's not the way you calculate it. It's a 2% swing because Reform have lost 2 points and Labour have gained 2 points. It is a 4-point reduction in the Reform lead, but that's not the same thing as a swing. And right on cue, in fact, we also have a more in common poll. I presume it's been released today, which actually shows a slight increase in the Reform lead over Labour. It's increased from 10 points in the last poll to 11 points this week, which may give some suggestion that the YouGov poll is just margin of error noise and that Reform haven't gone backwards. However, the more in common fieldwork isn't quite so up to date, so we'll just have to wait and see. I think the jury's out at this point. So now let's get to the real interesting part for us, which is the YouGov Scottish subsample results. And the SNP are once again, for the umpteenth time, way out in the lead on 33% of the vote. This week, Labour are in second place on 20%. Reform UK are in third place on 16%. Yet again, this always seems to happen. The Liberal Democrats are ahead of the Conservatives. They're on 12%. The Conservatives are on only 10%. And the Greens are on 6%. So this is a little bit lower for the SNP than last week, but it's not unusual. It seems to sort of oscillate back and forward. Some weeks the SNP are in the low 30s, some weeks are in the high 30s, which suggests a pretty healthy vote. It could be somewhere in the mid 30s, perhaps, in reality. Labour's 20% is a little bit on the high side for them, but when it gets to the point where Labour Party are supposedly doing well when they get to 20%, the heady heights to 20% in Scotland, then you can see that their underlying position is disastrous. And another very poor result for the Conservatives. And admittedly, it's another poor result for the Greens, but I don't take that very seriously because, of course, well, not only is this just a subsample, it's also Westminster results, whereas what matters for the Greens is not just the Holyrood result, but the Holyrood list result. That's where they win seats. Anyway, that's it for now. If you're enjoying this content, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll see you later.